The asteroid struck in less than 2 seconds, but that is not the story you're about to see. This is the 24 hours that came after it, the hours that actually did the killing. Within an hour, the sky above nearly every continent on Earth is glowing red. Scientists compare it to standing inside an oven set to broil for a full hour, everywhere on the planet at once. Wildfires ignite on every continent that had exposed forest almost simultaneously. A wave taller than a modern skyscraper crosses an entire gulf and erases the coastline in its path. By hour 12, forests that took centuries to grow have burned to bare, blackened ground across the world. 3/4 of all species on Earth will not survive what began this single day. Every non-avian dinosaur that ever lived is gone within a geological blink of an eye. And yet, some of the smallest creatures on the planet are about to inherit everything. This is the hour-by-hour story of the day that ended the age of dinosaurs. This was not the moment the dinosaurs died. This was the day that made sure they never had a chance to survive it. Subscribe to this channel. It means everything to us. Now let's begin. The asteroid is already gone. It struck and vanished in less than 2 seconds. What you are about to see is not that moment. It is the 24 hours that came after it. The hours that actually did the killing, because the impact itself, as violent as it was never the real extinction event. The real extinction event was everything that happened next, 66 million years ago. A rock 10 kilometers wide struck the coast of Mexico. In the first second, it punched a hole more than 20 kilometers deep into the Earth's crust. That is deeper than the ocean above the Mariana Trench. For the next 24 hours, this single day would decide the fate of nearly every living thing on the planet. This is that day. Hour by hour. We only know any of this happened because of a thin gray layer of clay found in rock all over the planet. In the late 1970s, a geologist named Walter Alvarez noticed something strange in that layer. It was packed with an element called iridium, extremely rare on Earth but common in asteroids. His theory that an asteroid strike had ended the age of dinosaurs was mocked by much of the scientific community at first. It took another decade before oil company survey data revealed a buried crater off the coast of Mexico, matching the exact right age. Today, that crater is called Chicxulub, named after the small village sitting almost directly above its center. At nearly 200 kilometers across, it remains one of the largest confirmed impact craters on the entire planet. It took until the late 1990s for the scientific community to broadly accept what that thin gray clay layer had been trying to tell them all along. 0 minutes. The crater is still forming. Molten rock and vaporized stone are being hurled straight up out of the atmosphere itself. Some of this material will not fall back to Earth for hours. some of it for days. The shock wave from the strike is already radiating outward, faster than sound itself. Within minutes, it registers as an earthquake of magnitude 10 or higher. For comparison, the strongest earthquake ever recorded by modern instruments was a 9.5. This is roughly 30 times more powerful than that. Every fault line on the continent begins to slip at once. Ancient volcanoes, dormant for millions of years, are shaken awake by the tremor. On the other side of the planet, massive volcanic fields in modern-day India, already active for thousands of years, may be violently intensified by the shock. Some scientists believe this single tremor accelerated eruptions that had already been poisoning the atmosphere long before the asteroid ever arrived. 10 minutes in, the ground is still shaking violently, hundreds of kilometers from the crater. Forests are being flattened not by fire yet, but by the sheer force of the seismic wave passing beneath them. Imagine standing 1,000 kilometers away, feeling the ground roll beneath your feet like open ocean swells. You wouldn't know why. You'd only know that something on this planet had just changed forever. Meet a Triceratops herd, grazing along a river valley hundreds of kilometers north of the strike. They have no way to understand what is coming. Only the instinct that something is deeply, terribly wrong. Meanwhile, out at sea, the ocean floor itself has been violently displaced. A wall of water begins rising where the shallow sea once sat calm. This is the birth of the largest tsunami in the geological record. 20 minutes in, that wave is already taller than a 10-story building, and it is accelerating outward in every direction across the Gulf. 30 minutes in, something strange happens at the crater itself. The initial surge of water rushing away suddenly reverses. Ocean water begins pouring back into the newly formed crater, flooding it with debris and drowned forest material. Scientists studying the crater today can still see this exact moment preserved in the rock layers, a thin line of charcoal and displaced sediment, a fossilized record of the reversal, frozen in stone. 40 minutes in, the first ejecta thrown into the upper atmosphere begins falling back to Earth. Some of it left the atmosphere entirely, briefly becoming space debris before gravity pulled it home, as millions of tons of rock and glass re-enter at extreme speed. They compress and superheat the air around them. Each fragment becomes its own miniature meteor, blazing across the sky. 1 hour in, the sky above nearly every continent is now glowing red, not from a sunset, but from the sheer volume of superheated debris raining down from orbit. Meet the thermal pulse, the single most underestimated killer of that day. Scientists compare its effect to standing inside an oven set to broil. For roughly 1 full hour, this wasn't isolated to Mexico. It happened everywhere on Earth at nearly the same time. Animals caught out in the open, with nowhere to hide from the sky itself, had almost no chance. That Triceratops herd, 1,000 kilometers from the strike, never sees an explosion, never sees a shock wave. They simply look up at a sky turning the color of embers and feel heat pouring down like sunlight through a magnifying glass. There is no escape from a threat coming from directly overhead. Everywhere, all at once, 90 minutes in. Forests thousands of kilometers from the impact begin igniting. Not from lava, not from the blast itself, but from radiant heat pouring down out of a sky on fire. 2 hours in, wildfires are now burning on every continent that had exposed forest cover. This may be the closest the planet has ever come to a truly global fire. Some researchers believe the fires consumed a significant share of Earth's entire forested land. In this single day, for comparison, the worst modern wildfire seasons on record burn a tiny fraction of one continent's forest cover in an entire year. This was every continent, burning simultaneously in a matter of hours. Large dinosaurs unable to burrow or flee fast enough had almost nowhere left to hide from the heat itself. Marine reptiles like the massive mosasaurs patrolling shallow seas had no idea anything had even happened yet, until the wave arrived, 3 hours in. The tsunami has now crossed the entire Gulf of Mexico. Waves estimated between 100 and 300 meters high are crashing into ancient coastlines. That's not a wave rolling onto a beach. That is a wave taller than most modern skyscrapers. It doesn't just flood the coast. It erases it and keeps moving inland in some places. The surge is later estimated to have traveled more than 100 kilometers before slowing, 4 hours in. The backwash begins, dragging enormous volumes of shattered coastline back out to sea, layers of jumbled marine and terrestrial debris. Plants, shells, charcoal, all mixed violently together. This exact debris layer has since been found by geologists as far away as Louisiana. A single day's chaos, fossilized permanently into the rock beneath the modern Gulf Coast. 6 hours in. Smoke from the global firestorm begins merging into a single dark haze around the planet. Soot and ash are being lofted higher and higher into the atmosphere by the heat of the fires themselves. For animals underground or in deep water, this hour offers something rare. A chance. Burrowing mammals, insects, and amphibians sheltered beneath the surface may be riding this hour out completely unharmed. 8 hours in. The sky that had briefly glowed red from falling ejecta is now turning black, not from night falling naturally, but from smoke blotting out what little daylight remains. 10 hours in. Surviving animals near the impact zone are experiencing near total darkness at midday. Temperatures near the fires remain scorching. But elsewhere, without sunlight, the air is already beginning to cool. 12 hours in. Half of this single day has now passed, and already forests that took centuries to grow have burned to bare. Blackened ground across entire continents, deep beneath the waves. However, life along hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor barely notices anything has changed at all. Entire ecosystems powered by chemical energy instead of sunlight would carry on almost completely undisturbed. It's a strange irony. Some of the planet's most alien environments turn out to be among its safest places on this particular day. 14 hours in. The tsunami waves, weakened but still dangerous, continue rippling across distant oceans. Some models suggest the wave energy from this impact eventually reached every ocean basin on the planet. 16 hours in. Ash begins falling like snow in regions thousands of kilometers from any fire. This ash isn't harmless. Fine particles are being inhaled by any surviving animal still struggling to breathe. 18 hours in. The initial firestorm is finally beginning to slow as fuel runs out across scorched landscapes, but the smoke it created isn't going anywhere. It is only just beginning its true long-term job. 20 hours in. What's left of the sun appears only as a faint, dim glow through thick haze. Surface temperatures in many regions have already dropped noticeably from where they stood that same morning. 22 hours in. More Ejecta, launched hours earlier on ballistic paths around the globe, is still falling. This bombardment of returning debris will actually continue for several more days after this one ends. 24 hours in. The day is over in one single rotation of the Earth. A magnitude 10 earthquake, a wave taller than skyscrapers, and a planet-wide firestorm have all already happened. And yet, this day was only the opening act. The dust and soot lofted into the atmosphere during these 24 hours would linger for months, possibly years. Sunlight would be blocked so effectively that photosynthesis itself would collapse across much of the globe. Without plants producing food, the base of nearly every food chain on Earth simply disappeared. Global temperatures after that first brutal spike of heat would eventually plunge by several degrees on average. Oceans absorbing all that carbon and ash would grow measurably more acidic, straining shell-building sea life for generations. This is why the asteroid alone doesn't fully explain what happened next. The strike was a single blow. But this one day, and the years of darkness it triggered, was the actual extinction. Roughly 3/4 of all species on Earth would not survive what began this day. Every non-avian dinosaur that had ever lived, gone within a geological blink of an eye. That Triceratops herd, 1,000 kilometers from the impact, did not survive to see the second sunrise, but not everything died. And the survivors reveal something remarkable about this single day. Small, burrowing mammals, sheltered underground during the worst of the thermal pulse and the fires, freshwater and deep ocean species, insulated from the worst of the immediate devastation by water itself. Some early birds, descendants of dinosaurs who had already evolved the ability to fly far from the initial firestorm. These survivors didn't win because they were the strongest, or the largest, or the most dominant. They won because of where they happened to be standing. On a single, catastrophic day, turtles and crocodilians, able to submerge in water or mud for extended periods, rode out the worst hours largely protected. Many of the same reptile groups alive on that day are still recognizable, almost unchanged in rivers and swamps today. It's a strange kind of survival lottery. Size and dominance meant almost nothing compared to simple location and timing. In the aftermath, with the largest predators gone, an empty world slowly began refilling itself. Mammals that had spent millions of years living in the shadows of dinosaurs finally had room to grow. Within just a few million years, an eye blink in geological time, mammals had diversified explosively. That explosion, born from a single catastrophic day, would eventually lead to whales, elephants, primates, and us. Every human being alive today exists because of what happened during these 24 hours, not the 2 seconds of impact. The day that followed it, 66 million years later. The crater itself is barely visible, buried and eroded beneath Mexico's coastline. But the evidence of that single day is still written into rock layers on nearly every continent on Earth. A thin band of ash, a jumbled layer of debris, a scar in the geological record that will never fully fade. It is easy to picture extinction as a single instant. A flash of light and then silence. That's the myth most of us grew up believing. And it simply isn't what the rock record shows. The truth is far slower, far more drawn out, and in many ways far more terrifying. It took one asteroid and one single day to end an entire era of life on Earth. This was not the moment the dinosaurs died. This was the day that made sure they never had a chance to survive it.